Welcome back to Metropole TV. This is The Smart Investor. My name is Ali Khan Sachu, and we've got a tremendous guest here with us, the chairman of Kenya Association of Manufacturers, ex-derivatives trader at Bankers Trust. That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sachin, thank you for coming through today.
Very welcome. Thank you.
And we
Thank
really
you for
appreciate
having me. Yes.
It's a pleasure. Sachin, you know, last week we were looking through some of this KNBS data, and it seemed to indicate that manufacturing actually expanded year on year.
Yeah.
Should we take that data at face value, or is there something else happening that we're missing?
Manufacturing did expand in most sectors, except for one or two which flatlined or declined. But under the Big Four agenda, our sector was supposed to grow 36% compounded year on year up till 2022.
Wow.
So last year we grew around 6-7%, which
Whoa.
is better than the performance in previous years.
Yes.
However, we are far behind the target that we should have achieved. Yes.
And just break it down for us. What's happening in this manufacturing sector? We saw this data out of AGOA, so those textile people are doing quite well, are they?
The textiles, the apparel sector.
Yes.
Is
What's the difference between textile? Apparel is the same.
Apparel is the clothing.
Okay.
The textile is the fabric.
Yes.
That's used to make the clothing.
Okay.
So if you look at our exports to AGOA, the textile exports to AGOA grew from $355 million in 2017 to $405 million in 2018.
So that's pretty good.
It was good. However,
yes,
we lost some jobs in that sector. And this, what we're doing in the textile sector and the exports under AGOA, the apparel exports under AGOA, is we're moving away from commoditized garments,
more sophisticated,
to more what we call heavier work garments, which enabled the value of the exports to grow larger. The commodity segment is actually moving to our neighboring country. A lot of the investment in apparel and textile is coming into Ethiopia.
When you're saying commodity sector, I suppose you mean less value added.
For example, if it's a straight trouser or jeans and so on,
is that commodity?
Which is pretty much commodity, because what happens with this sector is, out of the $355 million of exports that we did, Kenya imports almost close to $280 million worth of fabric.
So net it's 75 million.
So it's the value addition is really only $75 million, which is kind of the labor component of what we're doing here. If we had a robust and a strong textile industry here, we could import substitute all those imports and actually have much more value addition here. However, for textiles, one of the biggest component of the input cost is power. Close to almost 29-30% of their input cost is power. So for the textiles, because they do spinning, knitting, weaving, and dyeing, these are all power-hungry processes. So you need to make sure you get textiles in and land it at a very low power cost for us to be competitive.
And what are we competitive from a power perspective right now?
No, we're not.
We're not.
We're
so
not.
You're saying to me that we're losing business to Ethiopia?
We're losing business on textiles to Ethiopia. Some large
Are they getting
textile
cheaper
factories,
power?
They're getting power at 3 US cents a kilowatt hour if they export.
Yes. What are we getting it at?
We're getting it at close to 16 US cents per
So how are we going to compete?
I think the only kind of advantage we have is on if you look at it on the wage to productivity ratio on our workers.
We're more productive.
We are more productive now, but that ratio is coming down significantly. It will tip over into Ethiopia's favor very quickly.
Whoa.
If we're not careful on our wage increases.
But are they subsidizing the power at 3 US cents?
No, it's hydropower from Ethiopia. Uganda, when President Museveni visited Kenya,
this time when he was by the beach in Mombasa,
3-4 weeks ago, yes, he said he would provide power at 5 US cents a kilowatt hour.
To the Ugandan economy.
To the Uganda. So he's encouraging manufacturers to go to Uganda and say, I'll give you power at 5 US cents a kilowatt hour. Kenya is stuck in this time warp of 13 to 15 to 16 US cents a kilowatt hour. And for energy intensive industries such as textiles and steel,
I was going to ask you about steel because there was a big steel conference, wasn't there?
Yes.
So is steel in the game? Because if you're paying this kind of energy cost, is it going to be competitive?
The steel industry is interesting in that it's been one of the drivers of Kenya's economy, and it is the largest, one of the largest industries within the manufacturing sector in Kenya. The major component for steel is what we call billets, and we import close to $900 million worth of raw material from outside. Unfortunately, we only export $110 million worth of.
So we're consuming.
We used to do much more. So we used to do much more exports until there was a change in the VAT formula, which has actually disincentivized exports in steel, and we've lost a market of close to $300 to $400 million.
Who took it?
Because it's basically to our neighboring countries, and part of it is also the 2% IDF fee and the 1.5% railway development fee. The 3.5% cost component here is actually making us less competitive in the region. So what we've requested as the Kenya Association of Manufacturers to government is bring down IDF and RDL to zero for raw material inputs for manufacturers, make us competitive. You can load it onto finished goods so that the government doesn't lose any revenue. It's a revenue neutral mechanism, and it stimulates local production and local exports, basically. Yeah.
And Sachin, are they listening to you when you're going with these? You know, when you're so out of whack, and you know, it's clear that if you don't do something, you're going to die. Right, I would have thought. If you're describing losses, which yeah.
So I think the government is fully briefed on the matters, and it does need to take strong proactive measures. It cannot be business as usual. It's got to be business unusual if we're going to hit 36% compounded growth year on year. So despite all these issues and so on, and some of the lost opportunities actually make you want to scream, to say, just fix this, and you'll move. Yeah, the private sector will just thrive. Yeah.
Now, you know, if you look at it, can I ask you one more thing about Ethiopia? We had a guest here last week. He was saying we're even losing flower farms to Ethiopia. Is that correct?
We were.
Yes.
And I saw a clip on your program earlier saying Ethiopia's exports declined.
Yes. Well, that was some data. So I was surprised at that.
Why did that happen? It happened because of a drought in the economy there last year. It happened because of the unrest, and
which is still ongoing.
It's still ongoing, and some flower farms were burnt down or invaded and so on. So a lot of them then pulled back and came back to Kenya. So I would say Ethiopia's a great story in terms of potential. However, the reality, as you know, is until they fix the differential between the official rate and the black market rate on the beer, they'll continue having these chronic forex shortages.
Which is very tough.
Yes.
Now, let me ask you one other question. KNBS said that 800 and something thousand jobs were created last year. Did you see that statistic?
Yes.
Is that correct?
I am struggling to reconcile those numbers with what we see as a reality on the ground. For example, in manufacturing, there was only very, very small growth, and the number of formal jobs in the manufacturing sector grew to about 308,000 people. to create 800,000 jobs is no mean feat.
Yeah.
However, I think we're seeing a slowdown in consumption.
This is what something you were pointing out. I mean,
Yeah.
all the available evidence is that nobody's got spending power. I mean, if you look around, is that correct? Is that,
It is.
yes.
I would say I would speak for virtually every manufacturer.
So
in
where's
saying
6.3% GDP going? That it's not creating any well-being effect at the bottom.
it's certainly not trickling down to the average citizen on the street. It's not trickling down to manufacturing firms as such. FMCG or fast-moving consumer goods sales are stagnant or dropping. So we have to fix a fundamental issue in the economy, which is that there is no disposable income spend in the economy at the
How
moment.
do you fix that?
A fiscal stimulus would have been great. However, we all know Treasury's hands are tied
We
at
probably
the
don't
moment.
have the balance sheet.
So what we do need to do is unlock credit in some way.
So
And
you're for the removal of the rate cap?
absolutely, we need to get back to risk-based lending, but not where you were having deltas between your borrowing rate and your deposit rate of close to 14 to 20%. And
No,
it's
I know
simply
you're a
not,
derivatives trader with your
That's
delta
simply
coverage.
that's simply not viable in this economy.
So let me ask you another question. If you look at Kenya, you know, one of the attractions is that it's a gateway, it's a linchpin state, the transit state. All these countries have got to use to export. Is that advantage eroding, or do we still have? Would you still say we have it? I mean, our human capital. I have to say, although you said people will catch up, still, if I go to Dubai and I get served by a Kenyan, it's a different ball game
It
to
is.
even a Filipino. No disrespect, but we understand service.
Yeah.
Our people are bright. You know, they're hardworking. But are our advantages eroding, in your opinion?
Strategically,
Yeah.
no. Competitively, we are eroding. And right now, for example, if we don't fix competitive, and I look at competitiveness in three forms. There's what we call our input competitiveness, so all the material coming in which we need to process, starting with the IDF, RDL, and port charges and so on. You look at your what we call your process competitiveness. So, for example,
that's
your
that's
utilities,
yourself, right?
your utilities and labor and so on within the process competitiveness. And lastly, you look at your outbound competitiveness, your deliveries, your moving goods across counties, getting paid on time, and so on.
One of the
You
toughest
look at
things
you
these
look
days.
at 13, close to a 13% cost competitiveness erosion, which has happened.
Over
and
what period?
we need to fix it. I would say over the last 4 or 5 years. And if we're not careful, we will continue to have more and more trading and less manufacturing. So we need really to fix it, because the job creation engine is manufacturing.
So when you look at job creation, we need to create something like 1 million jobs a year, right? Just
Yes.
to absorb the population.
Yes.
People call it a demographic dividend, but it could be a time bomb.
Correct.
It's turning out to be a time bomb for Bouteflika in Algeria, for
Yeah.
Bashir in Sudan. Are we on course to create enough jobs to absorb all these young people?
I think we can create a lot of the jobs in the Juakali sector. However, the Juakali sector has traditionally been ignored, and the economic impact of kind of being self-employed, not having a regular stream of earnings, etc., doesn't get you a mortgage, doesn't get you any lending or formal lending and so on. So you have what we call a huge amount of people who are excluded from the what we call the benefits of being in a formal economy. And
How do you
really,
I mean, every time I've gone to CAM, we've been speaking about this in
Yeah.
CAPSA. We want to formalize the informal economy.
Yeah.
Are we doing that, or is that just
we're
talk?
struggling. We're struggling really, and what we are seeing, for example, on the Kenya Association of Manufacturers is going to launch the SME hub launch an SME hub within CAM for manufacturing SMEs. So we're looking at everyone from incubators to accelerators to scale.
Yes.
So creating a pipeline of products, services, etc., targeted at manufacturing SMEs. So we're trying to do our bit. In fact, 64% of KM's membership is SME anyway.
Wow. Oh, is it?
Yeah.
I thought you were big boys.
No, very much. It is SME driven. We used to be SMEs ourselves, so I'm very proud to have.
So you
SMEs
made the
on
transition.
board. We made the transition, but we need more and more people to be elevated and get into larger scale. Let's create Kenya's own unicorns in manufacturing.
That would be fantastic,
Yes.
right? A unicorn, of course, is $1 billion market cap company. I think Jumia is the first unicorn from around here.
Yes, with a market cap.
Yes, after the listing.
Correct.
Now, okay, let's say if I said to you 5 years from now, we want to be at the leading edge, we want to be the dominant economy. I mean, we're like neck and neck depending upon what FX rate you're using with Ethiopia, but still World Bank and IMF talk about East Africa being actually one of the bright spots. What are your policy prescriptions so that all our people are employed with a reasonably good job and that our economy is not growing at 6.3 and we can't feel it's growing at 10 and we all feel it? What would you be doing?
4 things.
Yeah.
Number 1, address competitiveness.
This is okay.
Okay. Number 2 was illicit trade.
How much? Well, how big is that?
It's huge.
Yes.
And tomorrow we're opening the illicit conference, especially on liquor, which is taking place at Serena tomorrow.
Yeah.
Just give an example. The edible oil segment grew 62% in volume terms after the crackdown on illicit.
Wow.
We met the president at State House. We had a presidential roundtable. And we said to the president, His Excellency, can you declare the war on illicit trade? It's a national disaster. And he took that on board and formed multi-agency task force, etc. So the edible oil segment alone has grown 62% in volume terms. We've seen growth in liquor in the formal segment. We've seen growth in steel as well. So we're seeing some growth coming through from the crackdown on illicit. The fight against illicit hasn't stopped. However, we can do more to intensify it. And illicit covers various things from under-invoicing to uncustomed and so on. We still have goods coming in through Eldoret Airport, which people know who brings them in, but nothing's done. So there needs to be a concerted effort to drive the war against illicit. So we're happy action was taken, but let's go on and do more. The third thing is market access. Market access locally as well as in the region.
Yes.
And locally,
has this been a problem? First of all, to answer locally.
Yeah, locally is things, very simple things like, for example, the government doing a Buy Kenya, Build Kenya policy in terms of procurement for its own things, whether it's from number plates to furniture for government institutions and so on. The second thing is the prompt payments.
Yes.
That is vital to unlock liquidity. It's vital to unlock the velocity of money through the system as quickly as possible. And last area we would look at is create a predictable and a stable environment. That's the thing investors crave the most, and that will attract the most number of investors.
What has not been predictable in your opinion?
I think ad hoc policy decisions. So, for example, wake up and let's create a policy or another revenue creating scheme, which then impacts competitiveness and actually raises the cost of business for everyone.
Yes.
We've done well on the ease of doing business. We jumped from we jumped a lot of places to number 61. The target is to get to below 50 in a couple of years' time. what we, as a country, what we do need to focus on is really not the ease of doing business, but the cost of doing business, because that will bring pricing down for the 190 on the street and make things more affordable again.
Talk to me about what's happening in the regional economy. I mean, next door in Tanzania, the IMF have practically halved the GDP growth.
Tough environment. Spending is abysmal in Tanzania. And again, the unpredictable environment has actually driven away investors. So we're actually seeing some companies just shut down, and some are actually coming here, so Kenya's probably benefiting from
I thought the shilling was benefiting as well.
Yes, it is.
From the uncertainty that was.
Uganda, I think, doing well. The young population, consumption is fairly strong, and actually it's a market where business is growing.
Yeah.
So
I got a friend who's a transporter who's saying it's just unbelievable the amount of soft commodities coming out of Uganda now, that the production is that true?
Yes. However, there are tensions between Uganda and Rwanda, and effectively trade is now stopped between those two countries.
Yes.
So maybe Kenya can probably fill some of the gap in Rwanda.
Right.
Tanzania and Kenya may fill some of the gap in Rwanda. On South Sudan, getting better, but still not fully where we were. Ethiopia is really the giant to watch. And unfortunately, I think if you're a long-term investor in Ethiopia and you've invested, you've taken care of your working capital needs, etc., because of the forex, whatever you produce can be sold right now in Ethiopia.
It can?
Yes, and we've seen some multinationals do that very, very successfully. They can't draw their money out, so they're instead putting more and more money
They're
back
recycling,
in.
they're having to double down.
Yes, and so we're seeing a lot of that in Ethiopia. However, it's still a challenging environment, and whether Prime Minister Abiy can continue on the path he's set upon, in terms of freedoms and so on. So there may be what we call reform mechanism at the top, but unfortunately the bureaucracy underneath, it may prevent him getting traction.
I think that's the worry about him.
Yeah.
Sachin, it's been a real pleasure having you today and giving us such a full and frank and deeply insightful look at what's happening.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
No, it's a pleasure, and please feel welcome to come if you've got a particular thing you want to talk about.
Okay.
And we wish you all the success.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Thank
you.
you,
Thank you, Sachen.
Okay.
This was Metropole TV, the first 24-hour business news channel here in East Africa. This was The Smart Investor. I was your host, Ali Khan Sachu, and my guest was the chairman of Kenya Association of Manufacturers, Mr. Sachin Gudka. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
1 second.